Hello everyone and welcome to a wonderful game that just finished from the final round of the 2022 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. The tournament is now over, all of the games have finished, and before we check out this game, I would just like to mention something. Yesterday in the last video that I made, I mentioned that Daniil might be playing Magnus today if he's allowed to play, but for those of you who still don't know, this is the tweet by the Tata Steel Chess Twitter account. Daniil Dubov tested positive for COVID-19 on Thursday. A second test requested by Dubov himself showed a negative result. The Dutch health authorities stipulated that in these circumstances, the positive test result stands and supersedes the negative outcome. Hashtag Tata Steel Chess, saying that it doesn't matter if he's tested negative, if he only tested positive once, then that's the result that we are going to consider. So that's why there was no game today, and Magnus got a full point and of course won the tournament. As soon as I uploaded yesterday's video, I saw the news on Twitter, so I couldn't revert it. I did post it in the comments, but maybe some of you missed it. So now getting back to this game, I could have chosen many games, but I chose this one as it features again another Nimzo Indian, and again we go for the A3 line, not the Queen C2 or the E3 line, and it's a very enjoyable, like the one that Jurriaan played against Anish. So here, Praggu with the white pieces opens with D4. Esipenko, who would very much enjoy winning this game in the final round, as this would propel him maybe all the way to fourth place. Knight to F6, we have C4, E6, Knight to C3, and of course Bishop to B4. The Nimzo Indian defense is on the board, and now we often say that these are the main moves. We have also seen F3 by Sam Shankland, but here we have A3, just challenging this bishop and allowing black to double white's pawns here. So bishop captures, B captures, and now not B6 like Anish played against Jurriaan, but here the immediate C5. In that video, if you guys remember, we mentioned that this was the absolute main line. We have E3 and Knight to C6. We have bishop to D3, and now black castles. We have Knight to E2. You don't want to develop the F3 as you want to start pushing those pawns, so the knight will just get in the way. B6, preparing bishop to A6, and now white grabs the full center with E4. We have knight to E8 by Esipenko. This is the so-called Capablanca variation, and Praggu just castles here. And finally, bishop to A6 with a knight to A5 coming at some point. So you can see that once again, black's plan revolves around going after that double C pawn, but if you remember the game Jurriaan played against Anish, that did not go so well for black. So here F4, grabbing even more space. This is now looking very scary, and we have to challenge this massive center. So F5, we have E captures, and now D captures on C5. Now this is a weird move to see, but it's actually the top move in the position. It's been played before many times, and both of these players know this. It's been played many times. This is a very popular line. To give you an example, if you play something like D5, which makes sense, you want to grab more space in the center, knight A5, and white can just resign. There's no way to defend the C4 pawn, and the plan actually works. For example, Queen A4, you defend it, we're just going to play knight to D6, hence the knight to E8 maneuver. Very solid by black, and there's really no defense against capturing the pawn, and then it's just going to be a much worse position for white. So instead we have D captures on C5. Looks weird, but it works, because now white will use a lot of very important tempi to never allow black to go after this pawn. So B captures on C5, and now bishop to E3. Now we're threatening to pick up the C5 pawn, and black has to react to this. We have D6, and now knight to G3, going after the F5 pawn. So again, black has to react to this. Black does not have time to even try and go after the C4 pawn. And now you could play G6, but here we have knight to E7, defending the pawn like this, and now comes queen to F3. Here there is a game where queen to A4 was played, but queen to F3 is a new move, so now it's as of move 16 that we have a completely new game. As you guys enjoy this information very much, there you have it. So what can black do? Well, he could again go G6, always very popular. We need to defend this F5 pawn at any cost. But Esipenko says there is plenty of time for that. We're gonna go knight to C7 first. And okay, we have rook A to B1. Praggu develops the rook to a nice open B file, and queen D7. Connecting the rooks, we have rook F to E1 now, and finally G6. So now the pawn is very nicely defended, and you can move your pieces. And as you can see, this is so very well analyzed that both white and black are perfectly fine here. It's very enjoyable to play this for both white and black, and it's not easy to find moves for either side, so that's why. It's well, once you run out of engine moves, it's not all that easy to find the move yourself. So it's not important, or rather, it's not sufficient to just memorize the moves. You also need to understand what the position means and where your pieces should go, where it would be great if the pieces could go. So here, bishop back to f2, we claim the e file for the rook, and now knight to c8. Now the knight is coming to b6, and maybe we can again start putting some pressure on this c4 pawn. So knight to f1, we need to have this knight d2 or knight d3 idea ready to defend the c4 pawn. Knight to b6, putting pressure on the c4 pawn, and knight to e3. Now Praggu defends it. We have rook 8 to e8. Black now we can say is fully developed, and now bishop to h4. It's a very nice diagonal for the bishop, much more useful than it was on f2. Queen to g7 now, going after the c3 pawn, and here rook b to c1. The rook is no longer useful on the b file, so rook b c1, we need to defend our pawn. We have rook to e6, and now we have a4. And this a4 move is such a great move by Praggu, because without it, you don't really see how to make progress in the position. Okay, you do have black as maybe a weak backwards d6 pawn, but other than that, you really don't have all that much to do with the position. But here, this a4 move really is impressive, because it's a pawn sacrifice, which black really should accept. If you don't accept it, a5 is coming, and then we're gonna weaken the d5 square, and we really want to win the d5 square for our pieces. So here, knight captures on a4 was played, and now knight to d5. We claim the d5 square for our pieces, and now black's main question is, does he want to capture on e1 before playing bishop to b7, or does he want to play bishop to b7 and allow the trade to happen on e6? So both are fine. Here we have the immediate bishop to b7 now pinning the knight. The knight cannot move. Rook captures on e6, knight captures on e6, and now rook to e1, putting more pressure on the knight here. And now the idea is, for example, if knight to c7, you're going to put a lot of pressure on the knight here, and hopefully you're going to bring this knight back to b6. But now we can play bishop to f6, and it's a very, very tricky line. Bishop captures on d5, we go for a queen trade. Bishop captures on g7, bishop captures on f3, bishop captures on f8, king captures on f8, and now g captures on f3. Finally, knight captures on c3, and you would get this position where white is up the exchange, but black is up 2 pawns, and black's pawn structure is much, much better. So white should still be better here, but not nearly enough to push this for a win. So this is one way to do it with knight to c7, but we have queen to d7 by Esipenko, and now Praggu plays queen to g3. Also possible here, instead of queen to g3, is just the knight to e7, because this kind of forces the endgame that you've already seen, but with a much better structure for white. So the idea is, after queen captures on e7, bishop captures on e7, we're going to play bishop captures on f3, bishop captures on f8, knight captures on f4, so really a beautiful capture fest here. Bishop captures on d6, knight captures on d3, rook to e8 check first, king f7, rook to e7 check, so we don't lose our rook, and now we're welcome to pick up the bishop, king f6, g captures on f3, and you can see it's a much better version of that endgame, where black is only up 1 pawn, and he's going to lose another one very quickly. So that's what happens here after knight e7. But it's a very tricky line. What if black doesn't go for a queen trade? What if black just moves the king to h8, which is also winning for white, but it's very complicated. So Praggu first started with queen to g3, and now this is not as great as the immediate knight e7, because black can just now trade here. For example, captures, knight goes here, attacks the pawn, rook to e7, and queen c8. Just a very passive position for black, but maybe it's better than what happened in the game. So in the game, we have rook to f7, but now it's just giving up the exchange with the queen still on the board, really. So queen g3 moved the queen away from the bishop, so now knight f6 check, rook captures, and bishop captures. So instead of going for that really passive line that we discussed, Esipenko gives up the exchange, and now he will try to do something here. Okay, he still has some play, he has the past a pawn. It's not all that terrible, but if you know what's coming, then you will see that the position is actually hopeless. So here we have king f7, now queen to h4, defending the bishop, and also queen captures on h7 is the threat. If you capture the bishop, black loses the queen. So h5 stopping this, and now bishop to g5. We have queen to c6 now, threatening checkmate, so queen to h3. For the moment, we have to defend. We have knight captures on g5, f captures, and now bishop to c8. We have to bring our bishop back into the game. Queen to e3, going for some checkmating ideas, so queen back to d7. We have queen to e2. And now comes queen to d8, putting pressure on the g5 pawn, but now queen to a2, going after the knight. So bishop d7 defending, and now bishop to c2. And with only within a few moves, Praggu forces this position to go very, very near an endgame, and it's not going to be easy for black to decline the endgame. So the knight has to move now. You could play knight captures on c3 or go back. Knight to b6 was played. Capturing the c3 pawn doesn't really bring black all that much. We have queen captures on a7, and now knight c8, attacking the queen. We have queen b7, and now knight to e7, and here just h4. And if you look at the position now, black just doesn't really have all that many moves. I mean, the king stranded on the 7th rank, the rook really controlling this e-file. The light square bishop not doing so great for the moment, but black is without a move. If you move the knight, even bishop to a4 can be played. I mean, it's just terrible. So here bishop to e6 was played, but now rook to a1. Now Praggu is threatening rook to a8, and that's it. For example, if bishop captures on c4, rook a8, and the black queen is trapped. There's no square for the black queen. So instead, queen to c8 was played. Here Esipenko offers a queen trade, and Praggu happily accepts. We have captures, and now bishop to b3, defending the pawn before activating the rook. So king e7, we have rook to a6, and now king to d8. We have king f2. Now Praggu starts bringing the rook and king into the game. King to c7 now. We have rook back to a1, and now bishop to f7. We have king to e3. Now comes bishop to e6, king to f4, and king to d8. So black repeating moves, not really... well, there's no move you can play here. We have rook back to a8 by Praggu, now king to c7. We have rook back to a2, still figuring out the best possible way to win this, and the bishop back to f7. We have rook to a1, king to d8, and now king to e3. We have bishop to e6, and now g3. So our opponent has a light square bishop, makes sense to move the pawn to a dark square. Also, at any point, black might have an idea of pushing f4. This will also prevent it, so now our king can roam freely. King to c7, we have king to f4, bishop to f7, and now bishop to a4. So now we're going to start taking away squares from black's pieces, and there's not all that much Esipenko can do about this. Knight b6 attacks the bishop, but bishop b5. Again, nothing really for black to do here. We have knight back to c8, and king to e3 now. We have bishop to e6, because now you are in, you are in Zugzwang. There's really not all that much where you can go. If you move the king away from the back rank, then we can just go in with rook to d8. If you try something like king to b7, then we can play bishop to a6 exchange here, bishop for knight, and then our rook against bishop is just winning. And well, if you move the bishop here, then we can just bring our bishop here. There's nothing you can play. If you play a silly move like bishop to g8, then again bishop to e8, we go after this pawn. There's no stopping it. So in the game, bishop to e6 was played, but now Praggu just played bishop to e8, and it was in this position on move 59 that Andrey Esipenko resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. There's no way to defend this. If you try, of course, knight to e7, then we play rook a7 check, and after king to d8, we just pick up the knight, and then we start collecting. King captures, bishop captures here, bishop captures here, and then you have just all the pawns in the world to win this endgame. So after bishop to e8, Esipenko resigned, and another brilliant victory for Praggu, who had he didn't have a bad tournament, but the second half of the tournament was much better than the first half of the tournament. And here another example of just how, when the top theory says that a3 isn't all that impressive, that it no longer serves its purpose. There you have two tournament victories in probably the strongest tournament in the world, where a3 just wins, as it's no one was expecting it, and it seems that white was just prepared much better. or just because something is considered a lesser move doesn't mean that you cannot create great victories with it. So I don't forget, here are the standings. So Magnus Carlsen wins the tournament with 9.5 out of 13. Very, very clean first place, a point and a half ahead of Mamedyarov and Rapport, sharing second and third. Then, or rather not sharing, Mamedyarov is second, Rapport is third. Then Anish Giri, fourth place with 7 points, Sergei Karyakin and Jordan Van Forees. With 6.5, Andrey Esipenko and Fabiano Caruana. You can see that if Esipenko had won, he would be on 7.5 with Anish there. With 6, Jan Krzysztof Duda and Vidit Gujarati. With 5.5, we have Sam Shankland and Praggnanandhaa. With 4.5, Niels Grandelius, and with 3.5, Dubov, but he missed so many games that it's, not really relevant. So yeah. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and this short coverage of the Tata Steel Masters 2022. I hope you enjoyed that as well. If you guys have any like favorites from the final round, I will consider them. But as I already promised, we are now going to cover the challengers, mainly the absolute onslaught of Arjun Erigaisi. He completely crushed the tournament, and well. I'll see how I'll cover it. Maybe I'll cover a few games in a few videos. Maybe in one video I will cover many games. Anything can happen. So yeah, once again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Robert Hallowell, and I would like to thank Isaac Pinol Katada, David Kimura, Yuri Rolachenko, and Veifan for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the other Tata Steel, and well, of course, checking up on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.